Okay, so here's Sargon in a video entitled Mind Your Language. He's going to be talking about critical race theory and how he thinks that policing language is really the real racism.
We should stop using the language that the critical race theorists use, because the critical race theorists admit that the whole point of their theory is to effect change, presumably to bring about some kind of equality, which we'll discuss in a bit.
Oh no, equality, the horror!
But in the case of critical race theory, it is about race. And as you can see from the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, they have some thoughts about whiteness. And because they are racist, I mean, this is a race-focused thing.
Sargon, pointing out racial dynamics in society and how people get treated systematically because of their race or their perceived race is not racist. This is literally just a new version of, actually, you calling me racist is the real racism. It's the worst deflection, and I can't believe he thinks anyone will take that seriously outside of the severe super right-wing group that he appeals to.
Because they are race-focused, and that's the lens through which they wish to see the world, that's the lens they wish you to see the world through as well.
It's literally people who are like critical race theorists and are like sociologists in that field. Yeah, they're gonna view things through that. Just like someone who, like, let's say someone's a sociological Marxist. They're gonna talk about issues through that lens. That's how any sociological viewpoint is going to view things through. If they have a specialty that they look into things from that sociological viewpoint, that's how they're going to see it and explain things, yes. And
and that is captured in their terminology. The very framing of the language that they're using and the way that they present their ideas is to make you agree implicitly with critical race theory. And they do.
Are you just admitting that you found the things that they're saying persuasive? Because that's kind of what it sounds like.
Do this on purpose. They know full well what they're doing. They're very intelligent people.
Daddy Sume, it's why mentats are the best. They're the ultimate generalist mentats. I don't know what that is.
They've written very thick books about the thing, and they are just explicit about their intentions.
Sargon! They're like sociologists. Yeah. What do you think? Do you think that they're... I'm an undercover sociologist. I'm gonna try and talk about society's issues, but I'm gonna do it sneaky. Like, yeah, Sargon. That's their job. It's their job, Sargon.
And because they obscure all of this in
Fallout mentats, I got you.
dense academic tomes, they know that the public don't read them. But I did, and it was boring. But it also was very illuminating, and so it's
Sargon, I'd love to know the last book you read that you didn't think was boring.
worth talking about their framing and the way they use these words. So the word that I think is most pernicious is the word whiteness. And this was exemplified by the Smithsonian a few months ago now when they...
It's Dune. Fallout just references it. If you say so.
Put out a series of infographics like this, talking about the aspects and assumptions of white culture and whiteness in the United States. This got a lot of people very hot under the collar, saying you can't say that
thank you for following.
Hard work and the nuclear family are white culture, because it makes it sound, as I say, deeply insulting to non-white people. But what we mean by that, really, is non-Europeans, but even then it becomes more finely granular. The Smithsonian did apologise for this, say, look, hard work and rational thought isn't just white culture, but there is an aspect of truth to what they're saying if you are to replace the word white with something else that is also, in fact, more accurate. Suddenly this actually begins to make sense, because these are not something to do with your race, nothing to do with your physical person. These are about the behaviours that we exhibit and the common culture that this creates and the set of values that this common culture is based on. So when they say white dominant culture or whiteness refers to the ways that white people and their traditions, attitudes and ways of life have been normalised over time and are now considered standard practices in the United States, and since white people still hold the most of the institutional power in America, we have all internalised some aspects of white culture, including people of colour. you've got to ask yourself, what exactly are you trying to say? Because it's clearly not...
It's very clear what they're trying to say, Sargon. They're trying to say that these certain aspects of white culture are so prevalent within society, and they touch every single person regardless of their race, that it's been internalized by people regardless of the fact that they may or may not be white. It's not hard to understand, Sargon. They were very clear if you're just quoting them verbatim.
Not really about race, is it? I mean, if it was about race, why would it have all of these social prescriptions? Rugged individualism. The individual is the primary unit. Self-reliance, independence, and autonomy are highly valued and rewarded. Individuals assume to be in control of their environment. You get what you deserve. Family structure. The nuclear family.
Right, Sargon. They're saying that within white culture, if we want to talk about people by how they are socialized due to their race in society, people who are white often have the notion that if something bad happens to you, then it's probably because you did something wrong. You got fired from your job? Oh, what did you do wrong? You got, I don't know, you didn't get hired for a job. Oh, you must not have been qualified. Oh, you got a medical expense that you weren't expecting? Oh, you probably, I don't know, shouldn't have been doing whatever thing you were doing, or you should have saved up more. This is something that is different for people of minority races. Like, if you're black in the United States, for instance, if you're being fired from a job or not being hired for a job, then you probably understand the reality that there are a myriad of factors outside of your control that are going to affect that, right? Because you're more affected by these extrinsic factors in society. You're already at a disadvantage due to a myriad of socioeconomic factors, on top of which you also have people who are explicitly racist, and you have to deal with these extrinsic factors so often that you recognize that there's a ton of things outside of the control of yourself that are causing a number of adverse things to happen to you and the people around you. White people are somewhat more insulated from that. Now, I'd argue in the last 10 years or so this has changed a bit, due to rising economic inequality, and I think this is why we get a lot of people who talk about, like, economic anxiety in relation to people who are Trump supporters, because I think for the first time in decades and decades, white people are facing economic downturn in a way they haven't previously. This also happened in 2008, but that's within the last 10 years. So, or no, it's not. It's actually 12 years, 2008. So, roughly within that time period, white people have seen their economic situation get better, as it has on the whole for most of the 20th century, but instead they've actually seen it get worse. They're not used to this. This is a scary situation for them, because they're so used to, like, the truism that as you get older, you gain wealth, or you will be taken care of because as long as you work hard, you're going to be taken care of. Because this is a lie that has been sold to white people for a long time, and for a long time, at least on the surface, it appeared to be true, because the systems were working in their favor for a very long time. In our favor. I'm white, obviously. However, with rising income inequality in a system that is continually working against the working class in general, they're finding that those previous truisms that mostly worked out are not doing so, and that's causing them to lash out and try and find reasons in all sorts of different ways. Instead of just admitting to themselves, hey, maybe there are things outside of my control that actually just hurt people, and it's not about working hard, it's about making a system that works for all of us. Instead of admitting that these, like, truisms that they were raised on are faulty and outdated, instead of doing that, they start to look for other people to blame. They start to say, oh, it's an immigrant, oh, it's black people who are trying to, you know, they're going out and doing protests because they're not being, you know, treated fairly or whatever, and all of these people just start freaking out, and then they find someone like Trump who claims that he's gonna, like, fix everything for them, and they're like, whoa, that's the solution to the goal. That's what's being talked about. Thank you, Bandito666 for following, and Psycho79 for following.
Father, mother, 2.3 children is the ideal social unit. Husband is breadwinner and head of household. Wife is homemaker and subordinate to the husband. I don't think that's a fair analysis of what the culture you're trying to describe is. I think that the what you call white culture view men and women as equal and free to make their own decisions. It's just customary, and women prefer to be homemakers than breadwinners, and men prefer to be breadwinners than homemakers overall.
Fucking yikes.
Children should have own rooms and be independent. which is what you'd expect from an independence and autonomy valuing society. And there's an emphasis on the scientific method, objective, rational, linear thinking, cause and effect relationships, quantitative emphasis.
Boy, I wish that were true.
What we could otherwise call empiricism. And this is not something that is universally valued by white people. You can come to Europe and find that there are countries that are not ruggedly individualist. They are
Sargon, the thing is aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. It literally says right here, you idiot. There's an American flag. Like, what? Why are you talking about Europe and Eastern Europe? Hello? Hello? Do you see this?
highly collectivist and the sort of countries that create socialism. In fact, you can find that self-reliance is not something that is highly prized. Independence and autonomy are not highly valued. The individuals are not assumed to be in control of their own.
Sargon, it literally says in the United States right there. It's right here. There's an American flag over it. I literally cannot be more, like, you literally could not miss the point harder than this. The only way this could be funnier is if the whole thing were styled as an American flag all the way down the page and he still didn't notice.
Environment. You can find countries where the wife, the children are not supposed to have their own rooms and are not really independent of the family structure. Like the Italian Mediterranean cultures are in fact very tight and familial. The children are not considered to be in...
Sargon, is this talking about Italy or is this talking about white culture in the United States?
Dependent or should be independent of the family. And there are definitely cultures around the world that don't think of or value objective, rational, linear thinking or cause and effect relationships. I mean, you can find the old example of science being racist because it can't explain how the shaman calls the lightning in this South African university. And a chap at the back is saying this is not true. This lady who's presenting the argument is laughing at him for thinking that the shaman doesn't call the lightning. And is the humor is because science is so racist and backwards that they just can't figure it out.
He's really stretching here. Dude, it's about the United States. Why are you picking out videos from South Africa? This is not white culture in South Africa. And nowhere in this document are they calling science racist. What are you talking about?
And
this is rambly even by Sargon standards.
That's not just white culture. That's not just white people. Again, there was two black people making the contention in that old video. But if we replace the word whiteness with something that is more accurate, because you couldn't replace this with Portugueseness. You couldn't say
Portuguese is a nationality.
Portugueseness is rugged individualism, or the family structure where the children should be independent, or things like this. You couldn't really replace it with Russian, Russianness.
Right,
again, Russian is a nationality. They're talking about race and the racial dynamics within the United States specifically. Thank you, Liability Lefty, for following.
Is the way that Russians and their traditions and ways of life have been normalized, where the individual is the primary unit. Self-reliance.
I mean, Sargon, I'm just going to repeat this because it's annoying me so much that he's doing this. Sargon, they're talking about white culture in the United States. They're not comparing it to, like, white people in another country. They're specifically talking about white people in the United States.
Independence and autonomy are highly valued. That's not something you can say about Russian culture, I think. However, if you would say, instead of whiteness, Englishness, suddenly you have a much more accurate statement. Because what this is a description of is...
It says white culture in the United States, Sargon. And if you're going to say, well, this just sounds like American culture, then congrats, Sargon, you get the point. The point is that American society and its culture have largely been shaped by white people. That's the entire point. Are you gonna spend 10 minutes of this 17-minute video literally not realizing that you're agreeing with what the infographic says?
English, individualistic, meritocratic, Protestant work ethic having, empirical culture. This is just the Enlightenment culture of England that had come to the 13 colonies that were founded by the English, and out of which the ideological revolution of the United States arose.
And again, those people continued to propagate into the United States and became the large racial group within the United States, and they're white. That's what they're saying, Sargon. They're saying that the culture in the United States has been propagated mostly by white individuals who have said things like this or stand by these moral truisms. You're agreeing with what the thing says!
Which is just an example of English republicanism. I think it's the only example of English republicanism, really, that we have. But it's all very, very English. I mean, it's English speaking, it has common law. The revolutionaries themselves were drawing upon English traditions of liberty and constitutional monarchies. So the idea.
I mean, I think the founding fathers would have a little bit of a. And for the record, I don't give a shit what the founding fathers think. But, like, there are a lot of things they intentionally did to be against what the English were doing at the time in terms of, like, even having a constitutional monarchy. They kind of took out the monarchy part, but whatever.
That you can just ascribe this all to white people.
Again, they're talking about white people in the United States, Sargon, which are the people that you're already talking about, who then propagated and then later partook in the institution of slavery by taking people from Africa, bringing them here, who then had a different cultural basis than white people. Nonetheless, they still resided in the same country. But, like, that's why you have differences between, like, white culture in the United States, which has its traditions from, again, what you said, people coming over from England and other places in Europe and forming the 13 colonies and eventually creating the United States and the Constitution and all that stuff. That's one cultural lineage. And then you have people who are brought over in bondage, in slavery, who have sort of their own internal racial culture because there's been so much segregation between the groups, historically speaking. And even today, I mean, we still deal with the fact that, like, for so long, even after slavery and after Jim Crow, there were still issues where, like, people didn't have the generational wealth, so you wind up with situations where not only due to wealth issues, but due to systematic racial issues of, like, redlining in the past and stuff like that, you have groups where, you know, you have areas that are primarily minority. Even though black people are a minority in the United States as a whole, there are communities that are primarily black, right? So we still have this, like, stratification in culture in the United States between what would be considered white people and people who would be considered black people, because historically they've been very separate. That's what they're talking about, Sargon. You're basically agreeing with what the thing said, but you're so ready to be mad that you're, like, circularly talking about it and not realizing you're agreeing. You're like, white culture in the United States is just the result of people coming from England and Enlightenment ideals. Like, yeah. Yep. And it's separate from the cultures of non-white people in the United States because historically they've been separate. Congrats. You get it, Sargon! Yay!
Is wrong. I mean, at the same time that the English were laying down the Bill of Rights of 1689, the French had an absolute monarch who was saying, I am the state. It's night and day examples of how countries should be run.
Just shitting on France for reasons.
And how society should be run. And so you can't just expand this to being white people. It's deeply inaccurate.
No, not for what they're talking about, Sargon. They're not comparing it and saying this is uniquely American necessarily, but they are looking at white people in the United States. Regardless of the beginning point from where these cultural values may have come from, and again, I agree that a lot of these values came from English individuals who came over to the United States and ended up founding the country. Like, yeah, but that doesn't change the fact that they are the foundational values that grew into the culture of the United States, which is largely brought about by white people. Yeah, you get it, but at the same time, you don't get it. It's very weird.
But as soon as you say it, frame it in racial terms, suddenly it sounds exclusive. Because culture isn't something that is just fixed.
Oh my god, Sargon, no one's saying it is either. Like, when I say the culture of the United States is largely white, I say largely because it's not entirely white. Look at, like, American music, for instance. Since the early 20th century, it's been spearheaded. Basically, every musical revolution in the United States has been spearheaded by black Americans. When we're talking about jazz, which later goes on to be rock and roll, and then we have, like, rap, R&B, hip-hop. All these things were pioneered by black people. And there's tons of other stuff, right? But my point is that largely the values that America has come from the people who came here freely, of their own free will, not the people whose descendants came over in bondage during slavery, who do have a very distinct culture, even though they are American, specifically because of the historical striation between white people, black people, and other minority groups.
You can go and integrate into another culture. You can learn their language, learn their customs, start acting like them, and make yourself amenable to the culture into which you've gone.
Which is literally what they're also saying. Sargon, in the thing you read at the beginning, it says that even though these things are derived from, like, white culture that may have originated, again, like the places that you're talking about right now, what that you're talking about in terms of coming over from England, I agree. But they're saying, and you read this at the beginning, Sargon, they say this gets internalized by everyone, including people of color, which is literally what you're talking about right now. It's how even though you're not necessarily part of the same culture, you are part of the same culture, but your cultural origins are not exactly the same as the cultural origins of the predominant group within your country. You still, internalize many of the same cultural values that are the majority opinion within the nation in which you live. You are agreeing with the critical race theorist here, Sargon. Learn to read! My god!
But you can't change your race. You're always going to be black, or you're always going to be white, or whatever it is. Which is why people saw it as being deeply offensive, to say that people can't choose hard work and the nuclear family, or all of this. These are somehow annexed to white culture, and that's just not true, because they're not describing white culture, they're describing English culture. And as soon as you say it like this, suddenly the impetus to
They're describing American culture, Sargon. Even if it does share with English, and I agree, there's, like, a ton of cultural crossover between the United States and the UK, England in particular. Like, they're talking about the United States. So no, this is not about English culture. This is about white people in the United States.
try and attack the culture goes away. You'll notice it's not about racial supremacy, and it's actually completely sensible for in the way that they describe some of the. This is Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility speaking here, but it's very interesting how if you change the words, it suddenly doesn't make any sense to even complain about these things. This white dominant culture also operates as a social mechanism that grants advantages to white people since they can navigate society both by feeling normal and being viewed as normal. How about this English dominant culture also operates as a social mechanism that grants advantages to English people since they can navigate society both by feeling normal and being viewed as normal? Yes, I imagine English people in an English society would be viewed as normal, and if you think about it, how could...
But Sargon, this is not about nationality, this is about race, because in the United States we have a pretty interesting and almost, I'm not going to say unique, but we have a situation where you have two cultures growing alongside each other that were separated for so long legally and even for longer up into today socially. Do you understand that, Sargon? Because white people being the predominant group in the United States who also had their freedom were able to basically facilitate and grow the culture of the country, and meanwhile you had people who were in bondage and were part of their own communities creating their own culture, creating their own unique cultural identity. And even after slavery, again, due to segregation and a variety of other socioeconomic factors, these communities continue to grow, but were separated, which is why they're talking about the difference between the primary white culture of the United States as it differentiates from typical black culture in the United States. We're not talking about, like, England, Sargon. If you want to talk about England, go talk about England. That's fine, but that's not what we're talking about.
Would you make it so that they're viewed it's not normal, and or that people from other cultures would be viewed as normal?
It is more than two. I recognize that. I'm using the two largest racial groups as an example. White and black, but of course there are Asian immigrants with their own communities and all sorts of stuff, but I'm just using those two as an example.
As an English person in an English culture. I mean, I couldn't go to Uganda and be like, oh god, this is, I mean, well, I could go to Uganda and complain that Uganda appears to be normal for Ugandans. They can navigate society and feel normal and be viewed as normal in Uganda, and I, as a non-Ugandan, would have difficulties navigating in a society.
Right. Now imagine that you grew up in Uganda, but you live in a society that's separated but also lies within Ugandan society. A separate group who has majority English neighborhoods who have a culture that's very similar to England. Now understand that then you have to go outside of those communities to navigate Uganda at large, whose culture is different than your own. And then you have a situation similar to African American people here in the States. That's what we're talking about, Sargon. The fact that due to, again, laws and social factors, there are separations between what we consider white culture and black culture in the United States. I'm sure over time these things will smooth over as, you know, the longer we get away from, like, slavery and Jim Crow and after the Civil Rights Movement. And hopefully we continue to make inroads in terms of, like, changing policing policies and helping poor communities, especially, like, schools, trying to stop funding schools through property taxes so it disadvantages poor communities. Like, these things, over time, will probably smooth over. And that would be great. But we're in a situation right now, Sargon, where it isn't the case, and there are still people who live in communities whose identity and culture is very different from American culture at large. MMO addicted. Oh god, I had a mental health day anyway, and now I jump in and it's just an F-wad. Nope. Sorry, Hannah. Nice cloak, but I need to jump out until Sargon ends. I understand.
Of whom the customs I'm not familiar. I mean, it's just, you can't have it any other way. Like, how would you do it? So that you were trying to make it difficult for English people to navigate English society, or as difficult as a foreigner who has come into the society.
Again, you're implying that white people in the United States and black people in the United States grow up in families with the exact same culture. And they don't.
Again, it doesn't make sense as soon as you start framing it in terms of ethnic culture, rather than the lowercase w white culture. Like, it's not a racial culture. It's an ethnic culture.
No, the United States definitely has racial culture. How can you say that with a straight face, Sargon? De facto, it has had racially divided cultures because we've had a racially divided society legally until the late 60s. Your parents are probably older than that, Sargon. My parents are older than that by like a couple of years.
And
actually, no, it's the opposite. My parents, at least one of them, was like 2 years old when the Civil Rights Movement was passed. Like, what? Like, first school integration students today. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. I'm gonna see if I can find an updated photo of, like, first school integration students today. Why can't I find photos of this? Doon. I'm not sure if the people from Little Rock are still alive, but let's see. This is from... What year was this? This is from 2018. This is how old the first students to deal with, like, integration were. You get that, right? They're not, like, 100 years old. They're not dead. This is how old the civil rights movement is, Sargon. Ugh. So frustrating. Culture has been segregated in this country, Sargon. And maybe you don't know that because you're English. And if you didn't know that genuinely, I would forgive you for ignorance. But the fact that you think you know about this and you think you can have an opinion on this that's informed when you clearly don't makes you look like an idiot.
This is not racially exclusive because it is bound up in a series of traditions and institutions rather than being predicated on skin colour, which is why I'm sure that so many people of colour have internalised some aspects of English culture because they're looking at what appears to be a culture that is selecting for liberty and autonomy and sort of self-ownership, but this as being a result of like the Protestant work ethic.
This kind of implies, again, Sargon, when they're talking about rugged individualism, they're talking about that in opposition to collectivism. There are societies, Sargon, that view more collectivist thinking and collectivist organization of society as virtuous as opposed to this idea of the American rugged individual pulling himself up by his bootstraps. So there is a difference there, Sargon. You're acting as though, and again, ironically, you're exactly buying into what this thing is talking about. You're implying that the rugged individualist way of looking at things is inherently the morally correct position. And I'm not saying it's inherently, like, morally incorrect. I'm saying that these sort of things are relative, and every society has different views on these things. This is the problem. Sargon's like, well, of course American culture stands for rugged individualism, because that's the correct way to be. Well, Sargon, if you think that, that's fine, and you can obviously make arguments in favor of that. But there are societies that don't feel that way and feel that collectivism and helping each other, even if it involves giving away some of your autonomy in order to support each other, they find that to be a moral value. And there's all sorts of, like, in-betweens between these two things, right? Rugged individualism and collectivism, there's a whole spectrum you could have from one to the other. America happens to be very much focused on rugged individualism. It's why you have so many bad situations in the United States where people can't get health care, because we as a society haven't decided, hey, you know, it would be good for all of us if we collectively got together and paid our taxes into basically an insurance program for everyone in the country. That's a collectivist position. And I think that would be a good thing. That doesn't mean that you need to go and, like, be a Marxist and, like, say that, like, all individualism is bad and everyone should only work for the good of the state that will then support individuals within it, right? That doesn't mean that. It's about being certain places along the the gradient between individualist and collectivist. Stephen J. Neptune Man says, rap and so much slang comes directly from black culture in America. Something is said by black people and then white people take it and water it down. Yeah, I've heard that.
For productivity and prosperity, and it seems to actively select for that. And you can read about this in books such as Why Nations Fail is a great example of the, they call it the inclusive model of English colonization compared to the extractive model of Spanish colonization, which is why the Spanish-speaking countries of the world, frankly, have got such problems. And the
Oh my god. Don't worry, it has nothing to do with interventionalism of the United States over the last century or so. Don't worry, South American countries and Central American countries. You democratically elected a leader that are gonna make the cost of my bananas go up. It's time to fund a revolution.
English-speaking countries don't. But that's a discussion for another time, really. But this, again, coming back to the language that's being used, we've really got to start asking ourselves, what are we being asked? From the framework of the sort of English heritage common law English-speaking countries that we have. Because if we agree that these are actually peculiar and particular aspects of English culture and Englishness, which...
This is the thing talking about the United States, Sargon. Why are you talking about, like, England and the United States and presumably Australia all in the same breath? They're completely different countries, and I understand that they have cultural similarities because both Americans, Canadians, Australians all have, like, cultural roots that go back to England, but it's been 200 years since that cord's been severed. Like, they're different countries, Sargon, and their cultures are different, and people within those cultures are different. So why are you talking about it like they're all the same thing? This is, I would argue, like, it's a way of watering down the argument. It's a way of him getting away with not talking about the issue at hand. It's blatant.
Which they are. All of these things are very much, I mean, they're still alive and well in some parts of England now. These are English values, so it's not wrong to say that, and these are not exclusive to English people either. Although you might be able to argue that the combination of these values put together are exclusive to English people. But either way, it doesn't matter because, again, they're just a series of values. These are a series of choices. As you see, individuals assume to be in control of their environment. Your choice matters. Autonomy is highly valued. You are an agent of whatever it is you're doing. You are the person who's responsible. And that self-responsibility is, I think, the source of the...
You want to do another take on that one, Sargon? No? Okay.
And that self-responsibility is the source, in my opinion, of the prosperity of the English-speaking world. But either way, let's have a look to being what we're asked to. This person is asking us to be equal to them. As far as I'm concerned, because of my English cultural heritage, I think that this is a choice. I think they have chosen to be like this. And what...
What? The fact that they have tape on their boobies and they have silly glasses on? What about it?
I look at when I see this person is someone who looks humiliated to me. This person...
I mean, clearly they're fine with the way they left the house. They're trying to get attention so that they can, like, effectively campaign for whatever they're talking about. No peace until we're equal. It's probably like a Black Lives Matter protest or something. So Sargon's argument here is literally, I think this person looks weird, which is a very adult way of having a discussion, if you don't know.
Person looks like they have been put through some form of ritual humiliation. They have had their head shaved, they have been muzzled, they've
muzzled? Sargon, they're wearing a mask because there's a pandemic on, you absolute jackass.
They've had their clothes torn off and they've been graffitied over by whatever ideological perspective their attackers have laid on them. And it looks like they've been persuaded to do this to themselves and then parade out in public with a sign saying no peace until we are equal. I'm sorry, I don't want to be equal in a lack of dignity with...
What a substantive argument, Sargon. I think this protester who's intentionally wearing funny things to get attention to the cause that they're protesting for, I think they look silly. Again, Sargon, you get the point. Good job.
This person. I think that whoever has done this to this person, made them feel this way, has abused them. But as you can see, this person is...
Tetsuyo Dragneel, oh god, I thought there was a premiere on one of my tabs and couldn't find it.
exhibiting the polar opposite of what we can describe as English culture. Again, what we're not going to describe as white culture. That is...
Putting tape on your titties is the opposite of English culture? In what way, Sargon?
The way that the critical race theorists would frame it, I, as an English liberal, look at this and say, well, this is just English culture, so we should call it that. But look at it. The individual is prime unit, autonomy is highly valued, assumed to be in control of your environment. You get what you deserve. Well, I would look at that and say you're getting what you deserve, which is presumably scorn and ridicule. But you feel like you should...
Sargon, this is probably from a Black Lives Matter protest or something. That person is probably being like, hey, we need to stop shooting black people or something. And you're like, no, I refuse because you look silly.
should be equal and deserving of the dignity of other people. Well, I disagree. And it's my cultural
Wasn't this guy
background
just
that makes
screeching about individualism a few minutes ago? Why is he saying this person he's mocking was brainwashed? Right, because the person looks different than him. He wants individualism, and that if you have problems, it's your problem. But he also wants you to get in line, because he's a conservative. And of course, conservatives want you to be individuals with your problems. But when you succeed and when you're out in public, you get in line, bitch. You're gonna do what we tell you. It's incredibly hypocritical. Fat Unicorn Backwards says he's basically saying that other people can't have dignity without him losing dignity, as if dignity is a finite resource that only has so much to go around. Yeah.
Makes me disagree with you. I mean, what do you think this person's opinion on the nuclear family is? What do you think?
I don't know. Does it matter?
They think about the husband being the breadwinner and the wife being the homemaker. And
this entire discussion isn't even relevant to what we're talking about, Sargon, because what that person is doing is clearly countercultural. They're clearly, like, making themselves look pretty striking intentionally. That has nothing to do with, like, white culture in the United States, or if you want to call it English culture, even though that's not what was being discussed here. Like, people can be different than what the culture in general is and still have that culture be the prevailing narrative. It just seems like a weird straw man. Tucker White 94. He's literally making arguments that I've heard Christians make to excuse bad choices. It was the devil.
Children being, you know, having their own rooms and things like that. Do you think they're family-oriented people? Do you think it's a person who's going to go back to their wife, or presumably husband, whatever, and cook dinner? Like, hi, darling, how was the protest? It was great.
Why does she have to cook dinner, Sargon? Like, in particular? Just curious.
Great, right, what would you like for tea? You know, this is a person who rejects what they're going to call patriarchal roles, but this is something that most people do, and they just prefer it. It seems...
Sargon, again, yeah, that's how prevailing cultural narratives work. Most people in the country that you're talking about, in this case the United States, are raised in it and therefore prefer that. Do you think that, like, cultural beliefs are somehow innate? No, people are raised in a culture and they internalize that culture and decide to prefer it most of the time. Not always, but as a general rule when we're talking about a culture, like, even though culture changes over time, the large, broad view of your own culture is that you're probably going to like it, regardless of where it is. Unless, of course, you're in a situation where the culture itself really, like, inhibits you in some way. Again, like, if you're black in the United States and you don't get treated well because of the color of your skin, like, that's gonna be a difference. But I'm saying, on the whole, like, a white person in the United States is probably going to accept many of the facets of American culture, white American culture, whatever you want to say it is, if not all of them. Tucker White, oh, I read that one already.
Seems natural to them. And again, do you think that this is an objective, linear thinker? This is a person who believes in logic, or do you think this is a person...
Sargon, again, your argument here is literally, haha, I think this person looks funny, which they're clearly doing intentionally anyway to get attention. So, are they a logical thinker? I don't know. I haven't talked to them. I don't know what their position is. I don't even technically know what they're protesting, but the fact that their mask says I can't breathe implies it's probably a protest after the George Floyd thing. So, yeah, they're probably logical in the sense that they see injustice in society and then want to go and take action and show their support of changing a system that hurts others. That's logical.
Who believes that logic is a construct of imperialism and white supremacy. I would very much doubt if this person agrees with very much of what is listed here at all. In fact,
Sargon's argument here is, if one person within a culture doesn't adhere to a culture exactly the way I say, then that isn't the culture. Oh wow, I guess all culture doesn't exist then, Sargon. Good job.
They seem to be directly flouting the things that are listed as English culture, and they seem to be doing it with pride. And
yeah, the getting attention thing worked. Sargon's literally talking about this lady. Like, yeah, you did it. Good job. You got, Sargon.
They seem to be demanding that we all become equal with them. And I think this is the source of Black Lives Matter having the anti-family, deconstructionist view on their website until recently, when it was taken off, because everyone realized, well, hang on a second, that seems to be the source of the problems in the black community. What are you doing? It seems to be entirely advantageous for children for them to be born in a nuclear family. Again, it seems to be selecting for certain things, which appear to be health and happiness and success, to be a part of a nuclear family. Breaking that up and making everyone equal in that regard seems to be giving everyone an equal share of misery.
I think basically on the Black Lives Matter thing he's talking about, basically it said like, hey, we need to support single black mothers and stuff and make sure that they're supported. And then people on the right got mad and they're like, no, they should face the consequences of their actions. And that's what he's talking about, I think. Again, I haven't looked into it. Look into it yourself, because I want to be done with this Sargon video.
So, I genuinely think we need to start changing the terms that we use. I don't think we should say white. I think we should say European. I don't think we should say non-white. And European, again, is a broad term anyway.
Or perhaps they become equal with us, not us equal with them, yeah.
I would say English culture if you mean English culture. If you mean what they mean when you're talking about this, you should say English. It's not German.
But that's not what they're talking about, Sargon. They're talking about the differentiation between white culture in the United States and black culture in the United States. Again, I'm not a sociologist, so I can't go into and, like, say I agree or disagree with every single one of these. Because, again, I'm not a sociologist. But if this was put out by the Smithsonian, which I think was what you implied at the beginning, I imagine a sociologist probably put this together, and they probably have research that backs up what they're saying. But the fact that you're talking about this like you are an expert on it when you're not, just makes you look stupid. Like, Sargon, neither of us are sociologists. Why do you think you can go into this field and talk about something like this and think that you can, like, outsmart someone whose entire research is to look into things like this? It would be the same as if, like, I were talking to Baja Blast about biology, and she said something, and I was like, really? That's what you think? Actually, I know better than you. Let me explain. Like, it would make no sense. Why are you disagreeing with someone whose entire job is to investigate this aspect of society?
German, it's not French, it's not Russian, it's not Italian, it's not Bulgarian.
Tucker White says, seriously, this is no different than Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson saying, the gays are destroying the moral fabric of America. Yeah.
Bulgarian, it's English culture from the English colonies that created the United States. Own the word, because the word itself has power, which is why they're trying to subvert it. We shouldn't, I mean, I'm very sour on the word equal these days, because
Sargon, I think your relationship with the word equal has always been tenuous at best, considering your positions.
Because equal is, again, a very broad term that requires everyone to effectively cease any kind of behavior.
What? The word equal forces people to cease any kind of behavior. Can anyone take that apart and try and explain what the fuck he thinks he means by that? Because I'm at a loss.
I would say free. I would say no peace until we are free. And if we can determine the ways in which these people are not free, and to be honest...
Right. Like being attacked by the police more severely than white people. Right, Sargon? Yeah? I'm gonna guess you're not gonna agree with that.
With you, looking at the way they're behaving, if they are somehow capable of flouting all of the norms of English society and go out in public and still...
I don't understand, Sargon, why you think that an infographic talking about what someone, probably a sociologist, thinks American white culture is somehow inherently a demonization of that culture. Pointing out the existence of something is not saying thing bad. You get that, right?
Not be oppressed, not be molested, and capable and able of doing this. I would suggest that person is free. So I think that they should stop complaining. But this goes for any other kind.
Sargon, they're literally talking about police brutality in the United States. Why do you keep... I don't understand. Sargon will simultaneously, like when he did the recent thing where he was talking about Britain's Got Talent doing a Black Lives Matter performance by a dance crew or something. He's like, why are they talking about American politics on Britain's Got Talent? Meanwhile, Sargon, every other video, is him trying to comment on some aspect of American culture or American politics. He's so hypocritical. He's such a bad faith argumenter. He's such a bad faith actor. He, uses whatever words he makes him look good in the moment without regard for anything he has ever said in the past. It's so blatant. It's frustrating. What are the chances that if I looked at the pro-segregation arguments back in the 50s and 60s, it wouldn't differ much from what Sargon is saying here? I doubt it would differ very much at all.
Of language that the radical left use. We should...
The radical left, who just want the police to stop murdering people. Oro, the villain with 10 bits, the fact that I was close in going down the alt-right pipeline back when I was in the closet to even myself back in 2016 is really scary. I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad you're here instead. Towing24, cease behavior equals I can't say the N-word anymore. Wah. The sad thing is, I think you're probably right. That is probably what he means.
Reject it all wholesale and use our own language, our own terms, in order to not fall into their ideological traps. Because as you are well aware, this is a form of subversion. This is a way of changing the way you think about things without you knowing that they have changed how you think to get them to accept your framing. So if you would like to support our channel, you can check out our merch store where we have lots of merch that is related to all this stuff, because I really think this is important. And I think it's important because they think it's important. They've been doing it for a very long time. They've been working on this, perfecting these methods for a very long time, and it is because they are so focused on it, and we are now where we are with people rioting in the streets and lunatics going out and acting like this is something to be proud of or something.
Sargon, you literally did the thing they wanted. They wanted to get attention, and you're giving it to them. You did it! Hooray! Sargon got. Cosmic Rocketeer with a bit, so I think my neighbor below me might be a sovereign citizen. I went to take my dog out and I saw a Don't Tread on Me flag along with a long note titled Notice to Peace Officers to Individuals in This Vehicle or something along those lines. I didn't spend too much time looking at it because it made me uncomfortable. Not only this, the car parked next to me is a Trump 2020 bumper sticker. I'm surrounded by idiots. Reminds me of that Spaceballs scene. I'm surrounded by assholes. Tucker White 94, now he's venturing into the vigilant Christian territory.
Their job must have been successful. I mean, I think there's no decoupling the two things from one another, and I think that they have had a remarkable amount of success. But anyway, I won't go on any further, and I'll see you in the next video.
Oh, Sargon. I pray for the day that your channel gets deleted, and you'll go to BitChute where you belong. That would be nice.